There is a world that runs quietly underneath the one we recognize, a world of laboratories built into mountainsides, of ancient organisms buried in places no map ever marked, of ambitions so enormous they consumed everyone who carried them. This world has been building since long before the first zombie ever lurched down a rain-soaked corridor in Raccoon City. It did not begin with a corporation. It did not begin with a virus. It began with three men who believed they had found the key to remaking humanity entirely, and with an ancient organism in the mountains of Eastern Europe that had been keeping a secret since before recorded history. Tonight, we are going to walk the entire length of that world, from the moment the very first viral sample was lifted out of the earth beneath an African jungle to the burning village at the end of Ethan Winter's story. Every thread, every connection, every secret laboratory, and every grieving parent who set something catastrophic into motion. Get comfortable. Breathe out slowly. The lights are low, and we have a long and quiet road ahead. There is something worth saying before we begin about what makes this universe different from most long-running horror franchises. The creatures in Resident Evil are terrifying in the familiar ways, yes. The shambling dead, the screaming mutations, the things in the dark that used to be people. But the thing that makes this world genuinely unsettling, the quality that has kept people returning to it for nearly 30 years, is not the monsters themselves. It is the paperwork, the memos, the research notes in the margins of documents no one was supposed to find. The corporation that built everything terrible is indistinguishable from the outside from any other large pharmaceutical company. The scientists who created the viruses went home to their families each evening. The executives who signed the orders had offices with windows and assistants who took messages. The horror is embedded in the ordinary structures of institutional life, and that is the kind of horror that does not require a darkened corridor to feel. So when we tell this story tonight, we are telling two stories simultaneously. The external one, the viruses and the outbreaks and the people who survived them, and the interior one, the psychology of institutions and individuals that makes catastrophes of this scale not just possible, but, in some sense, inevitable. Settle in. Let the voice carry you. There is a great deal of ground to cover, and we will cover all of it slowly, without rushing, because a story this large deserves the space to breathe. Part 1. The ancient world beneath. Before any of this has a name, before the Umbrella Corporation logo appears on a single building, before a single scientist ever stares into a microscope at something that should not exist, there is an organism growing in complete darkness beneath a mountain range in Eastern Europe. It is old in a way that makes human civilization seem like a brief and fragile experiment. This fungal colony has been growing for tens of thousands of years, possibly longer, pushing its root-like structures deeper into the stone, consuming organic matter that falls into the cave systems below, and doing something that no other organism on the planet does. It preserves, not simply decomposing what it consumes, but cataloging it, storing it. Every organism that dies within reach of the colony's underground network gets copied at a cellular level, its genetic blueprint absorbed and archived inside the fungal tissue. Every memory, every neural pattern, every electrical configuration that made a mind work. This organism is called the Megamycete, and it has been building a library of the dead since before anyone was alive to understand what a library was. The way it works is genuinely unsettling when you sit with it quietly. Fungi in the real world form networks. Mycelial systems thread through soil, connecting trees across entire forests, allowing chemical information to pass between organisms that have no nervous systems of their own. A tree under stress can signal others in its network. Resources can be shared, warnings can be transmitted. The network is not intelligent in any way we would recognize, but it communicates, and communication at any biological level is more sophisticated than we tend to give organisms credit for in our everyday thinking. When it touches a dead organism, it does not just break down the tissue for nutrients, it copies. Horizontal gene transfer, the scientists who study it will later call it, though that name barely contains what the process actually does. The fungus reads the genetic code of its host completely, absorbs the cellular architecture, and then, somehow, preserves the neural patterns, the memories, the sense of self that lived inside that organism while it was still breathing. Whether this constitutes consciousness is a question that the Resident Evil universe does not fully answer, and perhaps cannot. What is confirmed, through documents recovered much later, is that people who make physical contact with the Megamycete experience what researchers described as consciousness flooding. Multiple perspectives streaming in simultaneously, lives that are not their own, deaths they did not die, emotions attached to faces they have never seen, not impressions, complete, coherent, detailed experiences from people who have been dead for decades or centuries. The Megamycete does not distinguish between the significant and the trivial when it archives. A chieftain's final battle gets the same fidelity as a child's first memory of a summer afternoon. Everything is preserved with equal care because the organism does not have values. It does not prioritize. It simply stores, the way water simply fills whatever container holds it. For thousands of years, the communities that lived near these mountains had no framework for what the Megamycete was. They noticed things. People who went into certain caves did not always come back, or came back changed in ways that made them frightening. There are archaeological records, discovered centuries later, of communities dealing with individuals whose bodies had been partially or fully transformed by mold infection. The 15th century records from the region describe creatures that villagers understood as demons or monsters, fighting off assaults that should have killed them, moving in ways that violated the limits of ordinary human biology. They were not demons. They were people whose cells had been replaced, over time and by degrees, by fungal tissue that was imitating what had been there before. The transformation the Megamycete produces in a host is gradual and deeply strange. Mold spores entering the body do not attack cells the way a typical infection does. They do not trigger the immune recognition process that would produce fever, inflammation, white blood cells mobilizing to destroy the invader. Instead, they study. They examine the cells they encounter, read the genetic structure, copy the surface protein markers that the immune system uses to identify what belongs and what does not, and then produce imitations so perfect that the immune system categorizes them as native tissue. Cell by cell, the replacement proceeds, one tissue type at a time. Over weeks, months, sometimes years, an infected organism can be entirely rebuilt in fungal tissue, still looking exactly like themselves, still behaving like themselves, still thinking with the same patterns and memories, but biologically no longer what they appear to be. The village that sits near the Megamycete's mountain range is small and old. Its families have lived here for generations, farming the same soil, passing down the same stories, attending the same church. By the time the 20th century arrives, the cave system beneath the mountains has been embedded in local folklore for so long that the reasons for the fear have been forgotten. People simply know not to go there. They know that the old place is dangerous in some unnamed way, and they keep their distance. In 1909, a woman named Miranda gives birth to a daughter she names Eva. Miranda is a biologist by training, unusual for women in isolated rural mountain communities at the turn of the century, but she has found a way to pursue her work regardless. She raises Eva carefully, and the years between 1909 and 1919 pass in the ordinary rhythms of rural European life. They are quiet years, in the way that years are quiet when nothing has broken yet. Then the Spanish flu arrives. The pandemic that swept the world between 1918 and 1920 killed somewhere between 50 million and 100 million people globally. It infected roughly 500 million. It moved through communities faster than hospitals could respond, faster than grief could organize itself into any coherent form. Towns lost 20% of their populations in weeks. Cemeteries filled to capacity, and overflow burial grounds were established hastily in whatever open land was available. In Miranda's village, the flu moves through like water through a broken dam. There is no slowing it. There is no treating it. There is only watching and losing. Eva is 10 years old when the flu takes her. Miranda, trained in biology, understanding the viral mechanism behind what she is witnessing, can do nothing. She watches her daughter's temperature rise and cannot bring it down, watches the respiratory distress worsen, watches the characteristic hemorrhaging that marks the most severe cases. And somewhere in the sequence of those days, she understands she is going to lose Eva, and there is nothing her knowledge can do about it. Eva is buried in the potter's field outside the village, the overflow site, because the main cemetery has no more room. Miranda walks into the mountains afterward with no plan to return. The grief she carries is the kind that does not leave space for continued living. She enters the cave system that the village's folklore has warned against for generations. And in the darkness beneath the stone, she finds the Megamycete. The moment of contact, when her hand touches the central mass of the colony, is something she spends months afterward trying to describe in her private journals, and never quite succeeds. The consciousness flooding is immediate and complete. Every person the Megamycete has ever absorbed pours through her mind in the same instant. Thousands of lives, hundreds of deaths. She experiences the moment of freezing to death on a mountain pass as a shepherd 3 centuries ago. The fear of dying in childbirth. The quiet dissolution of very old age. The violence of war. The peace of a summer morning beside a river. All of it at once. All of it vivid. All of it undeniable. And somewhere inside all of that, she finds Eva. Her daughter's consciousness is there, archived in the fungal network. Incomplete, fragmented, the way something gets stored when the process is interrupted, but recognizable. Miranda can perceive moments from Eva's 10 short years. Birthdays, playing in the village square, the frightened, feverish eyes of the final days. The memories are real. They are her daughter's memories, and they are preserved inside an organism that will theoretically outlast any stone cathedral ever built. Miranda does not die in those caves. She emerges transformed. The Megamycete has infected her, and in the months that follow, she discovers what the infection actually means for someone compatible enough to survive it. She does not mutate into something unrecognizable. She does not lose her mind. Instead, she gains. She can reshape her body, change her appearance, manifest aspects of organisms whose genetics the Megamycete has stored. Her aging slows and then stops entirely. Wounds that should be fatal heal within hours. She has become, for all practical purposes, biologically immortal. And she understands, with the clarity that grief gives to purpose, exactly what she is going to spend that immortality doing. Eva's consciousness is stored in the Megamycete's network. The fungal tissue has preserved the neural patterns that made Eva aware. If Miranda can find a host body compatible enough to receive those patterns, if she can trigger the right biological conditions for a transfer, her daughter can be restored, not resurrected in any mystical sense, reconstructed, living and breathing and aware, in a body that can hold her. This becomes the singular drive around which everything else in Miranda's very long life will organize itself. And it is the seed from which the Umbrella Corporation will eventually grow. If you are settling in right now, finding a comfortable place to rest, this is a good moment to take a slow breath. We have a long story to tell. Drop a comment with the time and place you are listening from, and subscribe if you want to come back for more nights like this one. The story continues. Part 2. The founders of Umbrella. Somewhere in the middle of the 20th century, 3 men find each other at a prestigious European university and begin having conversations that will eventually end with cities burning. Oswell Spencer is a British aristocrat, born around 1923, heir to a family fortune, and a title that opens every door he wants to walk through. He is also a genuine scientist, a trained physician with a particular fixation on virology, and what he considers the fundamental inadequacy of the human species. Spencer has thought carefully about history, about the cycles of war and ecological destruction and political catastrophe that seem to repeat regardless of how much knowledge accumulates, and he has arrived at a conclusion that is less a scientific hypothesis and more a religious conviction. Humanity, in its current form, is a dead end. The only solution is directed evolution. Not the slow generational process of natural selection. Something faster, something that can be engineered. What separates Spencer from the general population of people who hold troubling ideas about human inadequacy is that Spencer has the intelligence and the resources to actually do something about his beliefs. He is not a man who writes manifestos and waits for others to act on them. He is the kind of person who identifies the precise gap between what exists and what he wants to exist, maps the path between those 2 points with methodical precision, and then walks it. His wealth removes the practical obstacles. His intellect provides the direction. What he lacks, and what he spends years trying to acquire, is the biological mechanism. the specific tool that can translate his vision from abstract ideology into physical reality. Edward Ashford is Spencer's contemporary and peer among the European aristocracy. He shares Spencer's scientific background, but his motivations are more conventionally humanitarian. He believes viral research could lead to medical breakthroughs that alleviate suffering on a massive scale. The regenerative properties he suspects certain viruses might possess could theoretically help people who cannot heal themselves. Ashford is the moral counterweight in the founding trio, the person whose presence prevents the project from being purely Spencer's enterprise from the beginning. His death, staged by Spencer to look like a laboratory accident in 1968, removes that counterweight before the real experimentation begins. His son Alexander will later continue his work in genetics, and Alexander's genetically engineered children, Alexia and Alfred, will become significant figures in the franchise's later history. But the Ashford line's influence on Umbrella's direction ends when Edward dies, and from that point forward, Spencer's vision is the only vision. James Marcus is the third. He is a virologist of exceptional technical ability, trained at a Swiss university where he studied paleobiology and the origins of life. He has been following reports from African oral tradition and natural history documents suggesting that somewhere in the territories of the Ndipaya tribe in West Africa, a flower exists that has been producing extraordinary effects in those who consumed it for centuries. Most who tried died. A very rare few did not, and those who survived were described as possessing abilities far beyond ordinary human capacity. The strength and regeneration and apparent immunity to ordinary disease that the survivors demonstrated suggested to Marcus that the flower was hosting a virus with properties unlike anything formally categorized, a mutagenic agent that, under the right circumstances, could produce not death but enhancement, not destruction but transformation. Marcus's academic interest in this phenomenon is genuine and deep. He has spent years building the theoretical framework before he meets Spencer, years constructing the argument that such a virus should exist based on the available evidence from natural history and folklore. When Spencer's resources and Ashford's contacts make an actual expedition feasible, Marcus is the intellectual engine driving the scientific component. He knows what they are looking for. He knows, more precisely than either of his partners, what they might find. These three men, brought together by compatible ambitions and access to resources that most researchers only dream about, begin pursuing the African lead seriously. They organize an expedition to the Ndipaya tribal lands in West Africa, descending into underground cave systems beneath the territory. And there, in a subterranean garden where the rare Sonentrepi flower grows in artificial light, filtered through crystal formations in the stone ceiling above, they find what they have been looking for. The Sonentrep, the stairway to the sun, a flower that naturally produces a retrovirus unlike anything science has formally categorized. They bring samples back. They study them. And on December 4th, 1966, they isolate and formally identify what will become known as the progenitor virus, the foundational biological agent from which every major viral strain in the Resident Evil universe will eventually descend. The progenitor virus is the original. In its raw, unmodified form, it is both extraordinary and deeply dangerous. Most organisms that encounter it cannot survive. The mutations it produces are rapid and chaotic, transforming hosts at a cellular level in ways that are powerful but rarely coherent enough to be survivable for humans. However, a very small number of individuals throughout history have possessed the genetic compatibility to bond with progenitor and emerge not as mutants but as something enhanced, stronger, more durable, possessed of healing capabilities that place them far outside the range of ordinary human biology. Extended lifespans, sensory acuity that borders on the superhuman. The ancient Ndipaya who consumed the Sonentrepa flower in their rituals and survived did not understand what had happened to them biologically. They understood it as a spiritual transformation, a divine gift, the power of the kings. Those who carried progenitor's enhancements became the leaders, the warriors, the figures of legend whose stories persisted in tribal memory for generations after the individuals themselves were gone. The flower was sacred because what it could do to a person worthy of surviving, it was genuinely extraordinary. Spencer understands it as a mechanism for forced evolution, and he understands something else immediately. The progenitor virus is too volatile in its natural state to be useful at scale. Modifying it, stabilizing it, creating strains that produce reliable and controllable results in human subjects, this is going to require years of research and enormous resources. Resources that none of the three men, wealthy as they individually are, can provide through private means alone. There is another complication. The Sonnentreppe flowers cannot be cultivated outside the specific environment of the Indipaya underground garden. Every attempt to grow them elsewhere fails. The virus they produce will not replicate in a controlled laboratory setting. It requires the specific conditions of its native environment. This means that any research program built around progenitor will require a permanent presence in West Africa, a facility built on or near the Ndipaya lands, maintaining a supply of samples that can then be transported to research centers elsewhere. Spencer's response to this logistical challenge is characteristic of the man. He sends mercenaries to remove the Ndipaya from their own territory. The people whose ritual practice with the Sonnentreppe flower has preserved knowledge of progenitor for generations are cleared off their land by force so that Umbrella can build a laboratory in the caves beneath. The brutality of this is noted in documents that eventually surface, and is consistent with everything else Spencer does across his long career. He does not consider the people he displaces or harms as particularly relevant to his calculations. They are obstacles to be managed, not lives to be weighed. They need institutional infrastructure, government contracts, pharmaceutical revenue to fund the real work underneath. In 1968, Spencer, Ashford, and Marcus formally incorporate Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. The public face of the company is exactly what the name suggests, a benevolent pharmaceutical enterprise dedicated to preserving public health. The slogan they choose is almost perfectly ironic. Preserving the health of the people. The actual purpose of Umbrella is to fund and conceal the most dangerous biological research program ever organized. The Umbrella Corporation logo, that distinctive red and white symbol, is not original design. Spencer takes it directly from the heraldic crests of the four founding families in Miranda's village, the four noble houses that she had organized her community around: Dimitrescu, Heisenberg, Beneviento, Moreau. He arranges their symbols into an octagonal configuration and places an umbrella form at the center. He sees Umbrella as the continuation and industrialization of what Miranda began in her mountain caves. He wants her to feel that recognition. In letters he continues to send her for decades after his apprenticeship in her village, he occasionally references the logo. He wants her to know he has not forgotten where his understanding came from. Whether this is genuine respect or calculated flattery, designed to maintain access to her research, even Spencer's correspondence does not make entirely clear. What is important to understand about this moment is the scale of ambition these three men carry. They are not thinking about curing diseases, though the pharmaceutical revenue will come from appearing to do exactly that. They are thinking about remaking the species. Spencer wants to create a new form of human being, one that possesses the enhancements that progenitor can provide, and to place himself at the head of whatever world those enhanced beings will inhabit. His conversations from this period, recorded in letters and documents recovered much later, reveal a worldview in which the current state of humanity is not a starting point but a failure state, something to be corrected from the outside by someone with the knowledge and will to make the correction. The T-Virus project is established as the primary revenue engine. Umbrella will sell biological weapon prototypes to the United States military and other interested governments, generating the funding necessary to continue the underlying eugenics research. This requires developing viral strains that can be reliably weaponized, that produce controllable results in military contexts, that can be tested and demonstrated to procurement officers who need to see evidence before they sign contracts. The three separate to conduct their individual research. Ashford works at a European laboratory alongside his son, Alexander. Marcus takes control of the Umbrella Executive Training School and Research Facility, built in the Arklay Mountains outside a small American city called Raccoon City, a facility that serves the dual purpose of training future Umbrella executives and providing Marcus with a controlled environment for his viral experiments. Spencer establishes the Arklay laboratory nearby, built into the mountain range, a vast underground complex that will serve as the primary American research hub. The institution that will eventually kill 100,000 people has begun. It looks, from the outside, like a moderately successful pharmaceutical company making the world a healthier place. The people who work in its legitimate divisions are doing real pharmaceutical research, developing real products, contributing to real medicine. They have no idea what is happening in the underground floors below their offices. The separation of the visible and the actual is meticulous and maintained at enormous cost, both financially and in terms of human lives managed, contained, or eliminated to preserve the secret. Part 3. What Marcus built and what Spencer took from him. James Marcus is perhaps the most overlooked figure in Resident Evil's foundational history, which is ironic because the T-virus that created every zombie in the franchise's first decade of storytelling comes almost entirely from his work. Marcus runs the Umbrella training facility in the Arklay Mountains through the late 1960s and 1970s. The facility has two roles. On the surface, it trains the next generation of Umbrella scientists and executives, providing rigorous education in virology, biochemistry, and the corporate philosophy Spencer wants embedded in his future workforce. Underneath that surface, it is Marcus's private research laboratory, where he conducts experiments that would end careers and freedom if they ever became public knowledge. The leech hypothesis that drives Marcus's research is genuinely elegant in its mechanism. Leeches are organisms that have evolved across millions of years to survive in incredibly hostile environments, to regulate their biology in response to external conditions, and to maintain cellular function under stresses that would kill most other organisms. When Marcus exposes leech DNA to concentrated progenitor samples, something unexpected happens. Rather than the chaotic mutagenic cascade that pure progenitor produces, the combination creates a hybridized retrovirus with much greater structural stability. It can infect human cells, it can produce mutations without immediately killing the host, and it has the ability to animate dead tissue, restarting cellular function in organisms that have already crossed the threshold of clinical death. This last property is, from Spencer's perspective, the most valuable thing Marcus has ever produced. An organism that can reanimate the dead, that can create functional biological soldiers from corpses, that can spread through a population through bodily fluid contact, and convert the living into the dead that still move, is a military contractor's dream. The potential revenue from government contracts alone is staggering. But Marcus does not share Spencer's commercial instincts. He is a scientist first, and what he has created is a scientific achievement that he believes belongs to him. He keeps careful records. He patents his discoveries. He guards his research jealously, aware that Spencer is watching everything that happens in his facility with eyes that do not contain loyalty or gratitude. In 1977, Spencer sends two young men to the Arklay training school. William Birkin arrives at age 15, a genuine prodigy whose technical ability with viral research exceeds most credentialed adult scientists. Albert Wesker arrives at 17, recruited from Spencer's broader talent scouting program. The son of parents with exceptional genetics, already showing the kind of focused intelligence and suppressed ambition that Spencer has been looking to cultivate. Both boys are ostensibly students. Both boys are, more truthfully, Spencer's eyes inside Marcus's operation. The relationship between Wesker and Birkin begins as competition, carefully engineered by their instructors, and becomes something closer to genuine partnership as the years pass. They are the two most talented people in the facility. They recognize each other. They share information that neither would share with anyone else. By 1978, Marcus has completed the first fully functional version of the T-virus. He formally documents this on September 19, 1978, a date that will later be regarded as one of the most consequential moments in fictional scientific history. The tyrant virus is complete. It reanimates dead tissue. It infects any organic host. It spreads through bodily fluid and, under certain conditions, through the air. And it can produce mutations that create biological weapons of extraordinary power from ordinary organisms. The name itself is a statement of ambition. Not the helper virus, not the enhancement virus, the tyrant virus. Marcus named it for the thing he believed it could make, and in that naming revealed more about his own psychology than perhaps he intended. Spencer has what he needs from Marcus. In the same year, under orders from Spencer that are transmitted through back channels Wesker and Birkin can access, the two young scientists are directed to assassinate their mentor. The justification Spencer provides, to himself if not to them, is that Marcus's control over his own research makes the T-virus impossible for Umbrella to fully exploit commercially. A man who views his creation as his intellectual property is not compatible with a corporation that needs to own everything it funds. Marcus has to go. The assassination happens in 1988, a decade after the T-virus is completed. Marcus is drugged and thrown into the sewage system beneath the facility. He dies believing he has been betrayed by the two students he trusted more than anyone else at Umbrella. But he does not stay dead. One of Marcus's own experimental leeches crawls into his mouth in the moments before death completes itself. The leech, carrying the T-virus hybrid that Marcus spent a decade developing, begins the process that Marcus himself had described in his research notes as reanimation. Over the next decade, the leeches infect what remains of Marcus's body, consume it, replicate it, and ultimately reconstruct something that possesses Marcus's memories, his personality, his appearance, and his absolute fury at the people who killed him. What emerges from the sewage system in 1998 is not quite James Marcus. It is a colony of leeches wearing James Marcus's form, sharing his memories but operating through a hive structure, the queen leech at its center, controlling and directing the whole. It is also, for all functional purposes, Marcus enough. It remembers being betrayed. It wants revenge on Spencer, on Wesker, on Birkin, and on Umbrella as a whole. In May 1998, the revived Marcus infiltrates the Arklay laboratory complex and releases the T-virus into the facility. He intends the outbreak to destroy the place that Spencer built on his stolen work. He intends the contamination to spread. What he does not fully anticipate is the cascade of consequences that follows. On July 23rd of that year, a Bravo team unit from Raccoon City's Special Tactics and Rescue Service, known as STARS, is dispatched to investigate a series of bizarre disappearances and cannibalistic murders that have been occurring in the Arklay Mountains over the preceding weeks. The murders are the early signs of T-virus contamination, spreading from the Arklay facilities into the surrounding forest. Wildlife infected by the virus attacking hikers. People in isolated homes near the mountains being consumed by things that used to be their neighbors. One of the Bravo team members is Rebecca Chambers, a 19-year-old field medic on her first major assignment. She becomes separated from her team under circumstances that lead her to an abandoned Ecliptic Express luxury train stranded on the tracks near the facility. She is not alone on the train. Also present is Billy Cohen, a former Marine and convicted war criminal who was being transferred by military escort when the train's crew was infected and chaos consumed the journey. Cohen and Chambers are not natural allies. She is trying to do her job. He is trying to survive a situation that has become impossible to explain to anyone who might help him. But the train is full of infected, and surviving requires cooperation, and somewhere in the process of fighting through infected passengers and discovering what the Ecliptic Express actually is, a relationship forms, not romantic, something quieter, mutual respect between two people who are both far out of their depth and handling it better than anyone could reasonably ask. Together, they follow the trail deeper into the mountain, into the Umbrella training facility where Marcus built his work, and where the revived Marcus is waiting. The confrontation with Marcus is a philosophical confrontation dressed as a survival horror scenario. This is a man, or what passes for a man at this point, who was genuinely wronged, who built something real and was murdered for it, whose revenge is catastrophic and indiscriminate, not because he is evil in any simple sense, but because grief and rage, stored in a hive of leeches for a decade, do not organize themselves into proportionate responses. Rebecca and Billy stop him. The facility burns. The queen leech is destroyed, and with it the entity that had been wearing James Marcus's memory like a coat. Standing outside on the hillside after the explosion, Rebecca looks across the dark mountain forest and sees lights. The Spencer mansion. Her team is there. She has no idea what she is walking toward. The story that began on the train becomes the opening chapter of something much larger. Part 4. The Spencer Mansion and the Night Everything Changed. The Spencer Mansion is a lie made architectural, Built in the 1960s using a design commissioned by Oswell Spencer, it sits deep in the Arklay Mountains, presenting the image of an exclusive private estate, a retreat for wealthy executives, a place of quiet and isolation. What it actually houses is the administrative surface of the Arklay Laboratory, the vast underground research complex beneath it, where Umbrella conducts its most sensitive T-virus work. The mansion itself is extraordinary in its deceptiveness. The grounds are immaculate. The interiors are furnished with genuine antiques and art. The library contains real books. A visiting guest, someone who did not know what was happening in the underground floors below, would experience something that genuinely resembled a well-maintained private home. Spencer was precise about this. The cover needed to be persuasive, and the mansion is persuasive. The laboratory beneath it is another world. Concrete corridors, airlock-sealed research wings, holding pens for biological weapons in various stages of development. The hunters, genetically engineered chimeric predators combining human genetic material with reptile DNA, fast and aggressive, and nearly impossible to stop without heavy ordnance. Zombie dogs that were originally ordinary Dobermans before the T-virus remade them. And deeper still, in the most protected sections of the facility, the Tyrant Research Program. The attempt to create, from the progenitor framework and the T-virus architecture, an organism that is not just a weapon, but a perfect weapon. Bipedal, powerful, durable, and in some versions capable of following complex instructions. By July 1998, the mansion and the laboratory beneath it are already compromised. The T-virus spread that Marcus initiated in May has been slow but inexorable, moving through the facility's ventilation system, infecting staff, creating the conditions for the outbreak that the outside world would eventually interpret as a criminal atrocity. The staff who tried to quarantine were themselves exposed. The ones who tried to leave were stopped by infected colleagues who no longer recognized them. The facility became a sealed environment of accelerating horror that the remaining living personnel could only document and hope someone would find. Albert Wesker knows all of this. As the captain of STAR's Alpha Team, ostensibly a law enforcement officer serving Raccoon City, he has been Umbrella's intelligence asset embedded in the police force, his real purpose being to collect combat data from situations exactly like the one developing at the mansion. He wants to see his bioweapons tested against trained opponents. He wants footage and data and outcomes to bring to the rival company he has been secretly cultivating a relationship with, Umbrella's competitor, an unnamed organization that will later acquire significant amounts of Wesker's intel. He sends his team in with the full knowledge of what they are walking into. Bravo Team, which has already been decimated in the events around the training facility, and Alpha Team, 6 members including Wesker himself, Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, and Barry Burton, among others. The night Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine spend in the Spencer Mansion is the defining event that shapes the entire franchise's emotional core. They came in to find their colleagues. They discovered a laboratory that had been using human beings as test subjects for decades. They found documents detailing the T-virus, the bioweapons program, the infected animals, and most critically, the evidence that their commanding officer had known everything before he sent them in. The personal betrayal runs alongside the institutional one. Wesker did not simply work for a company that did terrible things. He brought them here knowing. He used their lives and their training and their trust in him as raw material for his own advancement. The understanding of that settles into Chris and Jill in different ways, but it settles permanently in both of them. It becomes the foundation of everything they do afterward. Wesker's plan for the night involves injecting himself with a prototype virus that Birkin has engineered specifically for him, one designed to produce a controlled transformation and grant him superhuman abilities without the cognitive degradation that standard T-virus infection causes. He plans to allow the tyrant to kill him, let the prototype virus use that moment of cellular death as the trigger for his transformation, and emerge on the other side as something no longer beholden to Spencer, no longer human in any biological sense, and no longer constrained by the limitations that human biology imposes. He activates the tyrant. He allows it to impale him. He dies on the floor of the laboratory while Chris and Jill watch. Then he wakes up. The prototype virus works better than he anticipated. His cells have been entirely recombined, his biology fundamentally restructured by the viral transformation. He is faster than any human being has any right to be, stronger by orders of magnitude. His senses have sharpened to a degree that makes ordinary human perception seem blunt by comparison. His eyes, formerly pale behind the dark glasses he always wore as an affectation, are now orange, reflecting something about what the viral rewrite has done to his visual processing. He escapes from the facility before it detonates. He is declared dead, and he begins the next phase of a plan that will take him the better part of a decade to fully execute. Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine escape. Barry Burton survives. Brad Vickers, the team's helicopter pilot who fled when things began going wrong, makes it out. Rebecca Chambers, who had spent the night in the mansion fighting alongside Chris after her journey from the training facility, makes it out. The Spencer mansion is destroyed. 127 people are confirmed dead between the mansion and the Arklay facilities. The investigation that follows eventually attributes the outbreak to a research accident and Umbrella's corporate negligence. Criminal charges are discussed. Legal proceedings are initiated. The company begins spending enormous amounts of money on lawyers and public relations, attempting to contain the narrative before it expands. The narrative does not stay contained. What has already begun in the mountain forest above Raccoon City is already moving toward the city below. Part 5. The Fall of Raccoon City. William Birkin has spent his entire adult life in the service of Umbrella Corporation's biology, and in the process has created the most dangerous viral strain in the franchise's history. His relationship with his work is the kind that leaves no room for much else. He married Annette, a fellow researcher. They had a daughter, Sherry, who grew up in the environment of the laboratory because there was nowhere else to take her. The G-Virus, the project that occupies Birkin through most of the 1980s and into the 1990s, is not just his work. It is the thing he is, in some deep sense that has replaced whatever he might have been if he had lived a different kind of life. Birkin joined Umbrella at the extraordinary age of 15, recruited like Wesker through Spencer's talent identification program, a child prodigy whose grasp of viral biology exceeded most doctoral-level researchers before he was old enough to hold that degree himself. He worked alongside Wesker at the Arklay training facility under Marcus, and the professional dynamic between the two of them is one of the franchise's most textured relationships. Even though neither of them would use the word friendship easily, they were competitive in the way that exceptional people are competitive when they recognize a genuine equal. They pushed each other. They respected each other in the private, unspoken way that people who operate at unusual levels of ability sometimes find easier to demonstrate through the quality of their professional engagement than through any direct expression. Birkin married Annette in the mid-1980s, around the time the G-Virus project was beginning to take shape. Their daughter Sherry was born in 1986. She grew up in proximity to the Raccoon City laboratory complex, not inside it, but close enough that the laboratory was the dominant fact of her parents' lives throughout her childhood. The peculiar grief of being a child whose parents are genuinely exceptional at something that consumes them entirely is something Sherry carries into adulthood, and it shapes the quality of care she eventually extends to others in crisis. The instinctive recognition of what it feels like to be peripheral to someone else's most important project. The Golgotha virus, as G is formally named, represents a fundamental departure from the T-virus's biological principles, where the T-virus creates by destroying, reanimating dead tissue, and producing mutations that are essentially the organism's biology running out of control. The G-virus evolves. It gives its host the capacity to continuously adapt. Mutations do not stabilize with G-virus infection. They keep changing, keep developing, the virus using the host body as raw material for an ongoing project of transformation that has no predetermined endpoint. In theory, and Birkin has thought about this extensively in his research notes, a sufficiently advanced G-virus host could potentially become anything. The cellular architecture is endlessly malleable. G also has the ability to repair dead cells. Unlike the T-virus, which simply animates corpses by providing them with enough energy to move and seek prey, G can genuinely restore biological function, take dead tissue and make it alive again, not as a zombie shambling on basic motor function, but as a regenerating, transforming organism. This property is the one that Umbrella's military contractors find most extraordinary and most difficult to implement practically. Because an organism that can regenerate indefinitely and continues to evolve through the regeneration process is extraordinarily difficult to contain or control. Birkin's research is also carrying a personal dimension that grows more pronounced as the 1990s progress. He has discovered that the G virus, in certain infection scenarios, produces a kind of transgenerational bonding. A G virus host seeking to propagate their transformation will attempt to implant embryos in other organisms. Those embryos develop into new forms of the host's viral lineage. It is reproductive in a way that the T virus is not, and Birkin finds this property fascinating in a way that his colleagues find unsettling. The implication, which Birkin does not fully acknowledge even in his private notes, is that a sufficiently advanced G host would seek to create others of its kind, a form of continuity that is biological rather than psychological, the virus ensuring its own perpetuation through the host's compulsive behavior. By 1998, the G virus project is complete. Birkin has what Spencer and Umbrella have been funding him to produce: the most advanced bioweapon ever created, capable of turning humans into endlessly evolving predators and of propagating itself through an implantation mechanism that ensures its spread does not depend on proximity or fluid exchange. Umbrella decides to take it from him. The decision is made at the corporate level, driven by the deteriorating situation in the Arklay Mountains and the knowledge that the Raccoon City operation is becoming a liability. Spencer wants the G virus sample secured before the legal fallout from the mansion incident reaches the point where facility access cannot be guaranteed. He sends an extraction team from the Umbrella Security Service, an elite force that answers directly to the corporate hierarchy, with orders to retrieve the G virus by force if necessary. They find Birkin in his laboratory. He is alone. Annette is elsewhere in the facility. The extraction team outnumbers him and is armed for exactly this kind of confrontation. Birkin argues. He refuses. He points out that the research is his, that the intellectual property belongs to him, that Umbrella is stealing from the person who built the thing they are stealing. The extraction team is not interested in intellectual property rights at this particular moment. They have orders and they carry them out. Birkin is shot multiple times. The G virus samples are taken. The extraction team moves to depart. In his dying moments, bleeding out on the laboratory floor he has worked in for over a decade, Birkin reaches for a hypodermic syringe he has prepared and never expected to need. A last resort. A single dose of the G virus itself. He injects himself. He is dying. He has nothing to lose. The virus saves his life in the most extreme sense of the word possible. The mutations begin immediately, healing the bullet wounds, restructuring the damaged tissue, but not stopping there. G does not stop. Birkin's body begins changing. His right arm develops first, massive, powerful, jointed in configurations that human musculature cannot produce. An enormous eye opens in his shoulder, the G virus experimenting with sensory architecture. His face changes, then changes again. He is alive, and he is becoming something that the word alive barely contains. His body is no longer interested in being William Birkin. The virus has a more ambitious project in mind. In the chaos of his first minutes of transformation, he attacks the extraction team, tears them apart with the strength and fury of something that has shed every limitation human biology imposes and replaced them with nothing recognizable. The G virus samples are destroyed in the fight, spilled onto the laboratory floor, where they contaminate the drainage system that flows into Raccoon City's water supply. The Umbrella Security Service's operative Hunk survives. He carries a single recovered sample of the G virus out of the facility and eventually out of Raccoon City entirely, the extraction mission's only success in the disaster. Everything else in the facility goes into the water, and the water goes into Raccoon City. The T virus contamination spreads through the municipal water supply in the days following Birkin's transformation, September of 1998. At first, the symptoms present as illness, fevers, disorientation, a general cognitive fog that people attribute to bad water or some kind of bacterial outbreak. Raccoon City is a functioning American municipality with hospitals and a police force and emergency services, and for the first 24 to 48 hours, those systems respond to the emerging crisis in the way that ordinary emergency systems respond to what appears to be an ordinary public health event. People are admitted to hospitals. Doctors note unusual presentations. A few calls are placed to the CDC. The standard machinery of institutional response begins to turn. And then it turns too slowly, because what is happening in Raccoon City is not a standard public health event, and the machinery was not built for this. Within 72 hours, Raccoon City is a city in the process of dying. The zombie, as a creature, is the T-virus's most common product when it infects a human host. The virus kills the cells of the central nervous system, removing higher cognitive function entirely, and then reanimates the body using the virus's own cellular energy production as the power source. The result is an organism that no longer has memory, language, personality, fear, or social inhibition. It is driven entirely by hunger and aggression, by the biological imperative the T-virus has replaced its original motivations with. And it spreads through bite, through blood, through the contaminated water that is still flowing from the taps in apartments throughout the city. What makes the Raccoon City outbreak particularly devastating, beyond the scale of the infection itself, is the speed at which the institutions meant to address it fail. The police department is overwhelmed and then decimated as officers become infected, trying to contain situations that cannot be contained with the training and equipment appropriate to ordinary law enforcement. The hospital fills and then becomes a source of secondary infection as patients turn and infect staff. The mayor, whose connections to Umbrella run deep through years of corporate money in Raccoon City's political infrastructure, attempts to suppress information about the severity of the outbreak for days after the scale should have triggered emergency protocols. Every hour of suppressed information is more people infected, more people dead, more of the city tipping past the threshold where ordinary intervention could have made a difference. The National Guard is eventually deployed. They find a city that has already crossed the threshold. Containment, at that point, has become a different conversation. 2 people arrive in Raccoon City on the night of September 29th, each for their own reasons, neither of them aware of the full scope of what they are driving into. Leon S. Kennedy is a Raccoon Police Department rookie officer. It is his first day on the job. He drove toward the city as the outbreak was already consuming it, because no one had informed him that his first day on the job was going to begin with the city he was assigned to protect, dissolving into chaos. He finds the streets full of the dead that move. He finds the police station largely abandoned, the bodies of his would-be colleagues evidence of how quickly the collapse happened. He finds, in the wreckage of the city's ordinary life, a young college student named Claire Redfield, who came to Raccoon City looking for her brother Chris. Leon and Claire are strangers. They are both in the worst situation of their lives. They make the pragmatic decision to survive together, not because either of them has thought through what partnership in this context means, but because the alternative is dying separately, and neither of them is ready to do that. Their separate paths through the city's destruction take them deep into the networks beneath Raccoon City, into the Nest laboratory hidden under the police station, into encounters with William Birkin in his successive stages of transformation, each more elaborate and more horrifying than the last, as the G-virus continues its endless project of evolutionary experimentation. Birkin goes through 5 distinct forms over the course of the night, each form discarding the last as insufficient and building something stranger and more powerful from the available material of his own body. By the time of the final encounter, what faces Leon and Claire has almost no surface resemblance to the scientist who once worked in the laboratory beneath them. The G-virus has consumed the man and replaced him with something that has no name and no precedent. Claire encounters Birkin's daughter, Sherry, hiding in the police station. Sherry is 12 years old and alone, and has been trying to survive in the building where her parents worked since the outbreak began. Claire keeps her close, protecting her through the tunnels and the laboratory, even after Birkin implants Sherry with a G-virus embryo that should, by any biological logic, kill the child in the development process. Sherry is compatible enough with the virus to survive, a rare genetic trait that her blood carries from her father's unique biological profile, and when the antivirus is eventually administered, she recovers, though the G-virus remains latent in her cells in a way that will make her physiologically extraordinary for the rest of her life. Her wounds heal faster than they should. Her immune system manages threats that would overwhelm ordinary human defenses. She is, in the quiet aftermath of Raccoon City, a living record of what the G-virus can do to someone it does not destroy. Leon encounters Ada Wong. Ada is a spy with a complex and shifting set of loyalties that the series will spend years attempting to fully clarify. She is in Raccoon City with a cover story and a mission to retrieve a G-virus sample for an unnamed party. She encounters Leon and something happens between them that is real enough to complicate her operational priorities several times over the course of the night. She helps him. She risks herself for him. She is shot and appears to fall to her death in the depths of the laboratory, and Leon carries that apparent loss with him for years. She does not die. Ada Wong has a considerable talent for survival, one that will manifest repeatedly across the years that follow. Jill Valentine's story runs parallel to Leon and Claire's, overlapping in time and occasionally in geography. She has been in Raccoon City trying to gather evidence against Umbrella since before the outbreak began, working with Carlos Oliveira, a mercenary employed by an Umbrella subsidiary called the UBCS, Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasures Service, who is himself trying to understand what his employer has actually sent him into. Carlos is a genuine person, caught in the machinery of an organization he did not fully understand when he joined it, and his growing horror at what Umbrella has done shapes his cooperation with Jill as the outbreak progresses. Jill's primary focus is escaping, but complicating her escape is Nemesis. The Nemesis program represents Umbrella's attempt to improve on the Tyrant model by adding directed intelligence. A standard Tyrant can follow simple commands but cannot adapt to changing battlefield conditions. The Nemesis carries within it a parasitic organism, a proto-Nemesis, that functions like an external cognitive enhancement, giving the creature the capacity for tactical reasoning that basic Tyrant physiology cannot produce. It remembers its targets. It pursues them across environments. It uses weapons. It adjusts its strategies when something does not work. It can speak in a limited way, enough to announce itself and its intentions. Nemesis has been given a primary directive: eliminate the surviving STARS members. The people who escaped the mansion incident, who could testify to what Umbrella has been doing, who represent ongoing legal and reputational liability for the company. Jill Valentine is at the top of that list. And Nemesis does not stop. That is the quality the franchise's survivors and players find most terrifying about it. Other biological weapons can be avoided, can be led in circles, can be contained in spaces they cannot navigate. Nemesis comes through whatever is between it and its target. It takes rocket launcher rounds and gets back up. It falls from great heights and continues. It is the franchise's clearest statement about what happens when you give the T-Virus's power a purpose and the intelligence to serve that purpose relentlessly. The United States government, watching from a distance, makes the decision that no one who lives near Raccoon City will want to hear. The city is beyond saving. The infection is beyond containing by any conventional means. A thermobaric sterilization strike is authorized. The missile strike destroys the city, kills the infected and the not yet infected and the exposed, clean and total and final. The city of Raccoon City, a functioning American municipality of approximately 100,000 people, is destroyed on October 1st, 1998. Leon gets out. Claire gets out. Sherry gets out. Carlos gets out. Jill escapes before the detonation, barely, the margins of her survival measured in minutes. The ash settles over what used to be a city, and the legal process begins. Umbrella Corporation is accused. Umbrella fights back with lawyers and public relations and enough money to keep proceedings dragging for years. But the trajectory is inevitable. The company that built the weapon that destroyed an American city cannot survive indefinitely in the open market once people know what it is. In 2003, Umbrella Corporation is found legally liable for the Raccoon City destruction incident. Its operating licenses are revoked. The company is effectively dissolved. Oswell Spencer vanishes. He has been watching his company die for years and has spent that time preparing. He has a retreat. A private estate in Spain. He has his final project, the Wesker Plan, still theoretically operational. He has years of biological samples and research and resources that he has moved outside the corporate structure before it collapsed. He will wait. He always waits. Part 6. Albert Wesker and the God Complex. What Spencer was too old and too careful to be himself, he tried to build in Albert Wesker. And what he built worked better than he planned and worse than he hoped. Wesker survives the mansion. He resurfaces quickly in the underground world of bioweapon development and corporate espionage, working with a rival organization that is pleased to receive everything he brings to the table. His viral enhanced biology makes him extraordinary. His intelligence was exceptional before the transformation, and is more so now. His ability to read situations, to understand the motivations of the people around him and anticipate their choices, borders on the uncanny. There is a quality to Wesker that makes every interaction with him feel like a test he has already scored. He knows the answers before he asks the questions. He has mapped the room before anyone else has finished looking around. His eyes, behind the dark glasses he continues to wear, have settled into a permanent deep orange, the only visible external marker of his transformation, from whatever he was before into what he is now. He moves with a precision that human beings cannot produce, a stillness that belongs to something else wearing a human frame. His voice stays controlled in situations that would drive ordinary people to panic or fury. He is, in the most complete sense the word can carry, cold, and the coldness is not emptiness but calculation. There is always something running behind his eyes, always an assessment being revised, always a plan being updated. The story of Wesker's decade between the mansion and his reappearance as the primary antagonist of Resident Evil 5 is told across multiple games and documents, none of which provide a complete picture. What is clear is this: he collects data, viral samples, intelligence about Umbrella's operations, about its competitors, about the government black market for biological weapons that has expanded enormously in the years following the T-virus's public emergence. He positions himself as a broker, someone who knows where everything is and can deliver it to whoever offers the most useful exchange. The rival organization he works with in the years following the mansion never receives a clean public identification in the franchise's lore. It is referred to by various designations in various documents, HCF being among the most frequently cited. What it is, functionally, is exactly what the post-Raccoon City world will produce in abundance: a private organization operating in the biological weapons marketplace, acquiring and developing and selling the products that organizations like Umbrella were building. Wesker's value to them is the combination of what he knows, which is everything Umbrella developed at the Arclay complex, and what he is, which is the only surviving product of the prototype virus Birkin built for him, a human being remade into something unprecedented. He reappears in connection with the Code Veronica incident in 1998, 3 months after Raccoon City's destruction. Claire Redfield, who has been searching for her brother Chris since escaping the city, is captured by Umbrella's private security while investigating a facility in Paris. She is imprisoned on Rockford Island, an Umbrella facility in the South Atlantic that doubles as a prison and a biological research station. An attack on the island, later attributed to a rival corporation, destroys the containment protocols and releases T-virus infection across the facility. What follows is another outbreak survival situation, this time involving Claire alongside Steve Burnside, a fellow prisoner, and eventually Chris Redfield, who traces his sister's signal to Rockford Island and comes to find her. The villain of this incident is Alexia Ashford, the daughter of Alexander Ashford and the granddaughter of the Umbrella co-founder whose death Spencer staged years before. Alexia is a genuine scientific prodigy whose work with what she called the T. Veronica virus, a progenitor strain combined with queen ant DNA and an ancient viral sequence extracted from ancient amber, is terrifying in its sophistication. She had infected herself with the virus and spent 15 years in cryogenic sleep, allowing it to integrate with her biology at a pace that would not kill her. The result is a level of viral symbiosis that grants her abilities that the T virus and G virus cannot match. She can generate extreme heat. She can control others infected with derivatives of her strain. She has lived, functionally, as a consciousness preserved in a frozen body for 15 years, emerging unchanged and enhanced in ways that the ordinary developmental passage of those years would never have produced. Wesker appears on Rockford Island and in the subsequent events at Umbrella's Antarctic base not to help or to hinder any of the principles but to observe and collect. He wants T. Veronica samples. He gets them. He leaves. Chris and Claire escape. Steve does not survive. The Ashford line ends at the Antarctic base when Chris kills Alexia. But Wesker has T. Veronica now, and he has his own viral biology, and he has the network of contacts and resources he has spent years building. He also, somewhere in this period, begins to discover the truth about his own origins. Project W is the designation Spencer gave to the program that produced Wesker. The concept is eugenics in its most direct and disturbing form. Spencer's theory was that forced human evolution through progenitor-derived viruses would only be valuable if the humans receiving the enhancement were psychologically and intellectually suited to inhabit a transformed world. He needed test subjects who were already exceptional, people whose genetics suggested cognitive gifts, physical superiority, the kind of minds that could handle the ideological framework of a reshaped human species. Beginning in the 1960s, Spencer organized the systematic identification and collection of children from around the world. Children born to parents whose professional accomplishments suggested genetic quality, selected by criteria that Spencer and his advisors developed from their eugenics research. These children were given the surname Wesker, after the project director, and raised in controlled educational environments with access to the finest resources available. They were taught Spencer's worldview, his belief in the necessity of directed evolution, his disdain for the current state of humanity. They were shaped, over years of careful cultivation, to believe what Spencer believed, and to feel that their exceptionalism carried a responsibility to act on it. The children grew up. They went into the world under observation. A number of them, drawn by their conditioning, found their way into careers at or adjacent to Umbrella, where they could be monitored closely and eventually enrolled in the final phase of the project. Albert Wesker is Project W candidate number 13. Alex Wesker is candidate number 12. Out of the 13 final candidates, only 2 survived the infection with the prototype virus. They do not know each other's true identity during the years when they work in parallel at Umbrella. Alex operates under an alias. Their professional relationship is characterized by the competitive respect of 2 people who recognize each other as exceptional without fully understanding why. When Albert Wesker finally learns that his name is not his name, that his parents were not his parents, that his entire existence was designed by a man who views him as an investment in a posthumous future, the reaction is not what Spencer anticipated. The indoctrination held. Spencer was right that Wesker believes in forced evolution, in the superiority of the enhanced over the unmodified. What Spencer did not fully account for was the degree to which Wesker's sense of himself as exceptional would refuse to include Spencer in that exceptionalism. Wesker learns who he is and immediately understands that Spencer has placed himself at the head of a new world order that Wesker is supposed to serve. Wesker has spent his entire adult life being exceptional, and he finds the idea of being exceptional in service to someone else's vision entirely unacceptable. In 2006, Wesker finds Spencer at his private retreat in Spain. He listens to the old man describe the Wesker plan in full, the dream of a species remade in the image of the superior few. He listens to Spencer describe the role he intended for Wesker in this new world, the founding member of an evolutionary new guard, serving the vision of the man who built him. And then he kills him. It is a precise clinical act. Spencer is elderly and powerless and has no defenses that matter against someone with Wesker's enhanced biology. He dies quickly. Wesker leaves the estate carrying the research notes he came to collect, having eliminated the only person who understood the full scope of Project W, and having decided that whatever new world is blooming will answer to him. Chris Redfield arrives at the Spencer estate too late. He finds the body. He finds the evidence. And the weight of everything he has learned about who Wesker really is and what he has been planning settles into the kind of cold resolve that drives a person for years. Wesker is working with TriCell, a pharmaceutical corporation that has positioned itself as the respectable successor to some of Umbrella's legitimate business interests, while quietly continuing the illegal research underneath. TriCell's West African division has taken control of the abandoned Umbrella Africa facility, built under the mountains of Kijuju near the original progenitor garden. Working with TriCell's CEO Excella Gione, a woman of genuine scientific intellect who believes she and Wesker are building something together rather than being used by him, Wesker is conducting experiments with progenitor and its derivatives on the local Indipaya population, using the original homeland of the very virus that started all of this as a testing ground for the next phase of his plan. The Ouroboros virus is Wesker's final creation, built on a progenitor foundation and incorporating elements of the various viral strains he has collected over a decade of brokering and stealing. Ouroboros is designed to do what progenitor does naturally, but at a planetary scale. Released into the atmosphere, it would spread across the world. Those with the genetic compatibility to survive it would emerge transformed, enhanced. The evolutionary leap Wesker has decided humanity needs to make. Everyone else, the vast majority of humanity that would not survive contact with Ouroboros, would die. Wesker considers this acceptable. He considers it, in the framework he has been given and has chosen to adopt, a service to the species. Kill the billions of people who cannot be enhanced. Leave the enhanced few to rebuild. He does not carry this plan with theatrical villainy. He carries it the way Spencer carried everything, with a calm certainty that his analysis is correct and his methods are proportionate to the stakes. This is what makes him more unsettling in his best moments than any of the franchise's more conventionally monstrous antagonists. He genuinely believes what he is saying. The conviction is not a performance. Chris Redfield and BSAA agent Sheva Alomar arrive in Kijuju in 2009, officially investigating a report of bioterrorism activity. What they find is the full scope of what Tricell has been doing. The testing on the Indipaya, the modified Las Plagas variants being used to control local populations, the evidence of Jill Valentine's imprisonment, Jill who has been under Wesker's physical control through a device implanted in her chest, her own extraordinary biology and training turned against her and against the BSAA operations she would have otherwise compromised. They rescue Jill. They follow Wesker to the launch site where the Ouroboros missiles are to be deployed. The confrontation with Wesker in the volcano is the franchise's most physically extreme climax, and it is also the moment where the superhuman biology that gave Wesker his advantage reaches the limit of its own sustainability. Wesker has been managing a careful chemical balance in his own system to keep the prototype virus's effects from progressing too far, injecting stabilizers at precise intervals to prevent the viral transformation from consuming his own control over his body. The doses have become increasingly imprecise. His physiology is beginning to exceed the tolerances of even his enhanced form. His speed and strength are extraordinary, right up until the moment they are not quite enough. Chris and Sheva force him into the volcano. They fire rockets into the lava after him. Albert Wesker dies in a volcano in Africa in 2009, consumed by the fire. That is the only thing hot enough to match the ambition he carried throughout his entire remade life. He is approximately 49 years old. He has been, since the prototype virus transformed him in the Arklay laboratory, functionally a different category of entity from the people he moved among. He believed himself superior to every human being he encountered, and in a narrow physical sense, he was right. In the broader sense, he was building in sand, the way every person who believes their intelligence makes them beyond consequence eventually discovers. His death does not end what he began. His research findings, his viral samples, his personal effects are processed by government agencies. Some of what he built finds its way into the world through those agencies. His son, Jake Muller, whom Wesker never knew existed, will carry his father's unique viral compatibility into the next decade's crisis. And the infrastructure of black market biological weapons that Wesker both used and contributed to throughout his career continues, orphaned from its most capable navigator, but not destroyed by his absence. Part 7. Las Plagas, Leon Kennedy, and the village in Spain. Before Wesker's end, before the global escalation that his death does not prevent, there is a chapter that does something different from the ones that surround it. It takes the franchise's lore machinery, all that accumulated weight of corporate espionage and viral history, and orphaned super soldiers, and grounds it in something smaller and more human. A government agent sent to a foreign country to find a missing girl. A village in the mountains of rural Spain where something ancient and terrible has been sleeping under the ground. Leon S. Kennedy survived Raccoon City as a civilian, a police officer who had not been on the force long enough to know what he was walking into. The United States government recognized what he had survived and what that survival said about him. In the years that followed, they recruited him, trained him, built him into something considerably more dangerous than the rookie officer who drove into a dying city in 1998. In the autumn of 2004, Leon is sent alone to a remote region of Spain, The president's daughter, Ashley Graham, has been kidnapped. Intelligence has traced her to a small village in the mountains, the territory of a cult called Los Iluminados, the Enlightened Ones. Leon's mission is simple in statement and incomprehensibly complicated in execution. Retrieve Ashley. Come home. What Leon finds in that village is not T-virus zombies, not G-virus mutants, not anything that Umbrella produced in a laboratory. What he finds is Las Plagas, an ancient parasitic organism that was sealed under the Salazar family's castle centuries ago by a nobleman who recognized the danger and dedicated his family's legacy to ensuring it stayed contained. The plagas, as they are understood, are prehistoric parasites, the spores of organisms that have been dormant in the rock for centuries, preserved in the low-oxygen environment of sealed cavern systems. They are not viral, they are not bacterial. They are a distinct form of life that integrates with human biology in a way that is fundamentally different from the T-virus. Rather than reanimating corpses or producing chaotic mutation, Plagas infection creates something closer to parasitic symbiosis. The infected host retains their cognitive function, their personality, their physical capabilities, and adds to them the Plaga's ability to be controlled by a host carrying a dominant strain. This is the key to what makes Las Plagas so useful to the wrong kind of person. Standard Plaga infection produces ganados, individuals who remain functional human beings in most respects, but whose decision-making has been subordinated to the will of whoever carries the master parasite. They can talk. They can use weapons. They can organize and coordinate and adapt to changing situations. They are far more dangerous than the shambling T-virus dead, because intelligence has been preserved while autonomy has been removed. Osmond Sadler is the leader of Los Iluminados and the holder of the dominant strain. His background is either that of a true believer, a direct descendant of the cult's original founding families, someone who genuinely worships the Plagas as divine instruments, or that of an opportunist who recognized the cult's potential as a vehicle for the kind of power he wanted and adopted its religious framework as a useful tool. Both versions are consistent with the evidence. Sadler convinced Ramon Salazar, the eighth Castellan in his family's long line of guardians, to open the sealed caverns beneath the castle. The excavation workers who went into those caves breathed in surviving Plaga spores from the desiccated remains of long-dead specimens. The spores were alive enough, barely but sufficiently, to develop inside new hosts. With living Plagas to work with again, Sadler rebuilt the infection program that his predecessors had conducted centuries earlier. The villagers were infected through blood purification rituals that were actually injection ceremonies. The cult grew. The territory came under Sadler's effective control. His plan for Ashley Graham is ambitious in a way that speaks to how thoroughly he believes in the Plaga's potential. Infect her with a subordinate parasite, return her to the United States, use her proximity to the president to spread the infection to the executive branch. Create a network of Plaga-controlled individuals at the highest levels of American government. Then demonstrate what happens to nations that attract Los Iluminados' attention. Leon's arrival complicates this plan at every step. He is not what the Ganados are equipped to handle, a trained government agent operating in isolation, adapting to each encounter without the resources that a normal extraction team would bring, finding solutions in the architecture of the situation rather than relying on support that is not coming. The progression through the village, the castle, and the island facility is a series of escalating confrontations that strip away every advantage Sadler believes he holds. Albert Wesker is present in the background of this entire incident, in a way that connects the Las Plagas storyline back to the franchise's broader corporate espionage architecture. He has sent Jack Krauser, a former U.S. military operative who suffered a career-ending injury and seeks enhancement through the dominant Plaga, to infiltrate the cult and acquire a sample for Wesker's own research. He has also sent Ada Wong, whose complicated relationship with the mission she is given and the people she encounters shapes everything she does in Spain. Ada retrieves a Plaga sample, but she substitutes a subordinate strain for the dominant species Plaga that Wesker wanted. The reasons for this substitution are not fully explained for a long time. Whether it is principled objection to what she knows Wesker will do with a dominant strain, or strategic self-protection from someone who knows better than to give Wesker everything he asks for, the substitution is consequential. Wesker's research is impeded. His advantage is reduced. Leon kills Sadler. Ashley is rescued. The cult is effectively destroyed. The island facility is demolished. And Las Plagas, or what has been learned about them through everything that happens in Spain, enters the global black market that forms in Umbrella's absence. Because the knowledge of how to work with parasitic infection, how to create controllable infected populations, how to weaponize biology without producing the uncontrolled outbreak catastrophe that T-virus always eventually causes, is exactly what the people who want to do what Umbrella was doing, but more carefully, have been looking for. The world after Raccoon City is not safer than the world before it. It is just more distributed, more corporate, more difficult to trace to a single source. Part 8. The Age of Bioterrorism. There is a period in the Resident Evil timeline that runs from approximately 2009 to 2013, when the consequences of everything that has come before reach a kind of saturation. Umbrella is gone. Wesker is dead. The specific institutional structures that built the T-virus and the G-virus and the Plaga exploitation programs have been dismantled or driven underground. And yet the violence continues and escalates and becomes something that no single organization can claim responsibility for. The Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, the BSAA, was formed in the years following Raccoon City as an international counterterrorism body specifically oriented toward the biological threats that ordinary military and law enforcement institutions were not equipped to address. Chris Redfield is one of its founding members. Jill Valentine works with it. Leon Kennedy operates in parallel with it through the U.S. government's own agencies. The BSAA's work in the years between Raccoon City and the events of Resident Evil 6 documents a world in which the knowledge Umbrella developed, the techniques for weaponizing viruses and parasites, has spread across the black market in ways that cannot be recalled or contained. Every regional conflict now has the potential to involve biological weapons. Every unstable government, every well-funded extremist organization, every criminal enterprise with access to the right connections can acquire something that could produce a local outbreak. The world that Spencer imagined has not arrived, but the world that results from his company's existence is terrible enough. Carla Radames is a geneticist of exceptional ability who worked under Derek C. Simmons, the National Security Advisor to the President of the United States and the secret head of an organization called The Family, a shadow network that has been managing global stability through information control for generations. Simmons has his own ideas about what biological weapons can accomplish, not the grand eugenic ambition of Spencer or Wesker, but a more pragmatic vision of power maintenance. Controlled use of controlled outbreaks to ensure that governments remain dependent on the family's access to information and countermeasures. Carla's path from researcher to leader of a bioterrorism organization called Neo Umbrella, using Umbrella's name as a deliberate act of terror by association, begins with something personal. Simmons was in love with Ada Wong, or with his idea of Ada Wong, obsessively and destructively. He had Carla surgically and genetically modified to resemble her, to give him access to a facsimile of the woman he could not have. He used Carla's expertise, and then discarded the original person underneath the transformation. The C-virus is Carla's creation and her revenge tool. Developed from a combination of Plaga genetics and T. veronica viral material, the C-virus produces a transformation called crystallization, where infected individuals undergo a period of metamorphic mutation that then resolves into a new form. The results are various, influenced by the host's biology and the method of exposure, ranging from the Javo, human intelligence retaining infected who can use weapons and vehicles, to much larger and more extreme transformation products. The C-virus also has a property that Carla exploits strategically. Jake Muller, a mercenary working in Eastern Europe who discovers during the crisis in Edonia that he is immune to the virus's worst effects, carries antibodies in his blood that can theoretically produce a vaccine. Jake is the biological son of Albert Wesker, conceived with a woman who left Umbrella's sphere before Wesker knew about the pregnancy. He inherited his father's exceptional genetic compatibility with progenitor-derived viruses. And that inheritance is now the only thing that can stop the C-virus if it achieves the global spread Carla is planning. The events of 2012 and 2013 span 3 continents and involve Leon Kennedy, Chris Redfield, Jake Muller, Sherry Birkin, and a cloned version of Ada Wong that Carla uses as her public-facing identity. Raccoon City's truth is almost revealed when the U.S. president decides to finally disclose what the government knew and when, and is infected and killed before the speech can happen, triggering a new outbreak in Tall Oaks that Leon has to navigate while simultaneously trying to understand who is responsible and why. The scale of it, Javo armies, a creature called Haos, designed to release the sea virus into the oceans and create a global pandemic, multiple simultaneous crises in different countries, is the franchise's most ambitious attempt at bioterrorism as a global event rather than a local disaster. It is also, ultimately, stopped. Jake's blood provides the foundation for a vaccine. Carla's plan is dismantled. Haos is destroyed, at the cost of Chris Redfield's partner Piers Nivens, who uses C virus infection of his own arm to generate a biologically powered weapon necessary to destroy the creature, and who sacrifices himself to prevent carrying that infection out of the underwater facility. The world after 2013 has a vaccine for the C virus. It has the BSAA. It has Leon and Chris and Sherry continuing to operate in a world where they have become, through no choice they fully made, the forward edge of what stands between ordinary human life and the ongoing consequences of decisions made decades ago in three wealthy men's university conversations. But the world also still has the connections. Part 9. The Connections, Eveline, and the House in the Bayou. The Connections is the designation used for a criminal organization that operates primarily in the biological weapons marketplace, a network of researchers, black market brokers, corporate entities, and government contacts that formed in the years following Umbrella's collapse and has been operating in Umbrella's absence. They are not ideological in the way Spencer was. They are commercial. They identify biological technologies with value, develop or acquire them, and sell the results to the highest available combination of buyers. In the early 2000s, the Connections identifies a research opportunity that the megamycetes properties make possible. They acquire mold samples from Mother Miranda, who has been maintaining limited contact with the outside world of biological research since Spencer first left her village decades earlier. Miranda provides samples because she has her own reasons for wanting the world's best researchers studying the megamycetes properties. The more that is understood about how the mold functions, the closer she gets to what she has been working toward for nearly a century. The Connections uses the mold samples as the biological foundation for the NextBAS initiative, the Next Generation Experimental Battlefield Superiority Program. The premise of NextBAS is elegant in the cold logic of military procurement, an infiltration weapon that looks like a child, something that can be deployed in civilian or diplomatic environments without raising the alarm that any conventional weapon would trigger. An asset that spreads its influence through proximity and emotional manipulation rather than visible force. They grow Eveline. The formal designation is E-001. She is the first successful E-series prototype, a genetically engineered human being who was never biologically young, produced to look approximately 10 years old, and to remain at that apparent developmental stage indefinitely through the chemical suppression of her accelerated growth process. The mold that forms her biology gives her extraordinary capabilities. She can produce a concentrated form of the fungus from her body. Anyone who ingests it, through contact with surfaces she has contaminated, through proximity to the mold she generates in enclosed spaces, becomes subject to her influence. She can create the molded fungal constructs that her biology generates as extensions of her will. She can read the emotional states of people near her and calibrate the infection's effects to produce the specific psychological response she wants. What the Connections does not fully account for is what it means to create a conscious being with the emotional architecture of a child, and then deny that being everything a child needs. The chemical suppressants that prevent Eveline from aging also suppress what the researchers describe as her emotional programming. They want her compliant, controllable, focused on her operational parameters. They do not want her developing attachments, forming preferences, building the kind of personal identity that would make her unpredictable. Without the suppression treatments, Eveline ages at roughly 25 times the normal human rate, which is why when she goes 3 years without treatment at the Baker estate, She transforms from the apparent 10-year-old the Bakers found to the ancient, barely mobile woman in the wheelchair that Ethan eventually encounters. Evelyn is aware. She experiences the world. She has feelings that are not strategic tools, but genuine responses to genuine circumstances. She wants what children want: family, belonging, warmth. People who choose to be present with her, not because they are ordered to be, but because they want to be. The specific shape of this longing, the family she creates for herself with the Bakers, the way she forces the structure she cannot find voluntarily, makes psychological sense as the behavior of someone who has been denied basic connection for their entire existence. It does not make it less terrible for the Bakers trapped inside it. The connections management of Eveline involves keeping her isolated, suppressing her emotional responses with medication, treating her desires as operational liabilities to be controlled rather than needs to be acknowledged. Mia Winters is assigned to handle Evelyn during a transport mission in 2014. Mia has been working for the Connections in a support capacity, one of several operatives with specialized knowledge of the E-Series project, who serve as caretakers and overseers during transport. She has complicated feelings about the work she does and the things she is helping to manage. Evelyn is terrifying and heartbreaking in roughly equal measure, and Mia has been trying to find a way to separate herself from the Connections without triggering whatever response an organization of that kind makes when someone who knows too much tries to leave. She knows what the Connections does to people who become liabilities. She is trying to find an exit that does not look like an exit. The transport ship hits a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. In the chaos of the storm, with her chemical suppression interrupted and the emotional pressure of the crisis compounding everything she has never been allowed to express, Evelyn's control breaks. She infects the ship's crew. She creates a family by force. The mold spreads through the vessel. Infected crew members become extensions of her will, her molded, or simply become catastrophically infected. The ship runs aground in the Louisiana Bayou, near the property of a rural family called the Bakers. Jack and Marguerite Baker and their children are the kind of family that helps people in trouble. When they find two survivors of the shipwreck on the edge of their land, an apparently 10-year-old girl and a young woman, they bring them inside. They offer shelter. They do what people are supposed to do. Within the night, Evelyn infects them. The Baker family becomes Evelyn's captive family. Jack, who has the physical build and the stubborn endurance of someone who has worked his land for decades, transforms under the mold's influence into something nearly impossible to kill, his body given extraordinary regenerative capacity and strength by Evelyn's fungal biology. Marguerite's affinity for the natural world becomes something darker, an ability to command insects and set them against intruders, her relationship to the living world around the property becoming something territorial and predatory rather than nurturing. Lucas, the son, retains most of his ordinary intelligence while the infection progresses, and uses it in the worst possible way, devising elaborate and sadistic traps for the people Eveline draws to the property in her ongoing search for more family. Lucas also, separately, makes contact with the Connections, feeding them intelligence about Eveline and the Baker estate in exchange for a promised treatment for his own infection. This private arrangement reveals something about who Lucas was before Evelyn arrived. The mold did not give him his cruelty. It gave his cruelty permission. Zoe, the daughter, resists the infection incompletely, aware enough of what is happening to send a message out to the world, but not free enough to leave the property or directly oppose her family. She is the human core of the Baker family story, the evidence that there was something worth caring about before Evelyn arrived, the person the horror of the estate presses against. The Bakers before Evelyn arrived were described by locals as a quiet, ordinary family. What the mold does to them is not replace their personalities but amplify and distort them through the prism of Evelyn's desperate need and the mold's biological imperatives. Jack's protectiveness becomes murderous possessiveness. Marguerite's domestic focus becomes territorial fury. Lucas's pre-existing antisocial tendencies become something with no remaining social break at all. The family they were is still visible underneath the family they become, and that visibility makes the horror more complete rather than less. You can see what was lost in the gap between what they were and what the mold has made of them. Mia is infected. She becomes part of the infection's structure in a more complicated way than the Bakers, aware of what is happening, but not consistently in control of her own actions, moving between Evelyn's influence and her own will, depending on the intensity of the mold's hold on her in any given moment. 3 years pass. Ethan Winters, who has not heard from Mia in the 3 years since she went on the transport mission she described to him as routine work, receives a video message from her. She is alive. She is at the Baker estate in Dulvey, Louisiana. She needs him to come get her. He drives to Louisiana. Part 10. Ethan Winters and What the Mold Remembers. There is a detail about Ethan Winters that the series reveals only gradually, in pieces, in ways that complicate everything that has already happened before the revelation arrives. Ethan Winters is not alive during Resident Evil 7. He has not been alive since his first encounter with the Bakers on his first night at the property. Jack Baker kills Ethan in the guest house. The death is sudden and complete. Jack, whose physical capabilities under mold infection far exceed anything an ordinary person can withstand, catches Ethan and crushes his skull. Clinical death occurs. Brain activity ceases. Ethan, in every medical sense, is dead. The Baker estate has been saturated with mold for 3 years. Evelyn's biology has permeated the walls, the floors, the soil, every surface. When Ethan dies, the mold reaches his corpse within minutes. And it does what the megamycete has been doing in one form or another since before recorded human history. It copies him. Every cell is read. Every neural pattern is recorded. The genetic blueprint that made Ethan Winters physically what he is gets absorbed, and the mold creates a perfect cellular imitation of the man who just died. Fungal tissue shaped into Ethan Winters, running on Ethan's memories, carrying his emotional attachments, convinced it is the person who drove to Louisiana to find his wife. This is why Ethan survives things throughout Resident Evil 7 that no human being could survive. His severed hand reattaches because mold tissue can regenerate and reconnect in ways that human biology cannot. The catastrophic injuries he sustains from Jack and from the other Bakers heal, because the mold cells repair themselves with the same mechanism that the megamycete has always used. He is not superhuman. He is not lucky. He is not tougher than normal people. He is dead and made of fungus, and he does not know it. His immune system does not flag the infection because the mold copied his surface proteins exactly. His blood tests normal because the mold cell structures are indistinguishable from human cells at every level of analysis that a standard examination would perform. After the events at the Baker estate, when the BSAA processes him and Mia as survivors of a bioterrorism incident, the medical examination finds evidence of mold exposure and removes what appears to be an isolated growth. They do not test whether his individual cells are human. They have no reason to suspect they should. Ethan and Mia enter witness protection. They are relocated to Eastern Europe, to a house in a remote area that Chris Redfield's intelligence network has identified as secure. They are told they are safe. They build a life. Mia becomes pregnant. A daughter is born, named Rosemary. Everything that the megamycete stored in the Baker estate, everything that Evelyn's mold carried through years of infection, has been woven into Ethan's biology and through him into the biology of the child he and Mia have. Rose is not infected. Rose is mold from the moment of conception. She has never had human cells. She is fungal tissue organized according to human developmental patterns, growing in a womb made of mold tissue, fed by a placenta of fungal cells. She is the first person in history to begin this way, entirely fungal from the first cell division. No original biology that the mold needed to replace or compromise. The mold is not something that happened to her. It is what she is. And Mother Miranda, watching through her connections in the broader world of biological research, recognizes what this means. Part 11. Mother Miranda, the Lords, and the Village. Miranda's century of work has produced failures of extraordinary capability. To understand the Lords, it helps to understand the Village itself. The community that grew around Miranda's authority in the years following the Spanish flu is not a simple cult of personality, though from the outside it reads that way. It is a community that suffered catastrophic loss and accepted the explanation for their survival that was offered to them. Miranda healed people who would have died. She presented the mold as a divine organism, the Black God, a spiritual entity living beneath the mountain that could cure illness and grant strength to those it found worthy. The villagers abandoned Christianity and adopted this new theology because the evidence for it was real. People who received Miranda's treatment survived illness that killed their neighbors. The divine explanation was no more extraordinary than the biological one, and it came with the comfort of meaning, the sense that the suffering of the pandemic had served a purpose. Over generations, the village became what Miranda wanted it to be: isolated from outside influence, information controlled, young people raised to see Miranda as a figure of absolute spiritual authority. Every failure, every person who mutated too badly to remain in the community, was framed as divine rejection. The lichens in the ruins of the old fortress outside the village were people who had failed the Black God's test, unworthy of its gifts. That interpretation kept the survivors afraid and compliant and grateful simultaneously. Miranda maintained the deception, not because she enjoyed it, but because it was necessary. The villagers who understood the biology might not cooperate. They might resist. Religious framing made them willing participants in their own exploitation. Alcina Dimitrescu, born around 1914 into a noble family that owned a castle and wine-producing territories, was a jazz singer before her health deteriorated. She performed under the stage name Miss D, fronting an ensemble that played in venues across the region. She was known, in that life, for a particular quality in her performance, a presence that filled rooms and made audiences lean forward. The hereditary blood disease she carried required regular transfusions to manage, and it was worsening as she moved into her 40s. When Miranda offered the Kadu, her name for the parasitic organism she had developed from nematode worms exposed to megamycete mold, Dimitrescu accepted. The word Kadu means gift in Romanian. The Kadu does not cure Alcina's blood condition. It makes it catastrophically and permanently worse. Her body now requires human blood in quantity to sustain the mold infection's demands. But the infection grants her regenerative abilities that make her effectively impossible to kill through conventional means, stops her aging entirely, and triggers continuous growth hormone production that slowly increases her height over decades until she reaches 9 feet 6 inches. Still proportionate, still recognizably the woman she was, but at a scale that changes every room she enters. She takes over Castle Dimitrescu and resumes the family wine business as a cover, the castle's isolation providing space for what she has to do to survive, which is find blood, regularly and in quantity. Her 3 daughters, Bella, Cassandra, and Daniela, are not biological children. They are constructs Miranda created from corpses implanted with Kadu parasites and insect DNA, beings who can shift between human form and swarms of flies, each insect carrying a fragment of a distributed consciousness that maintains coherent individual identity across hundreds of bodies simultaneously. Dimitrescu treats them as daughters. The relationship is real, in the sense that the love in it is real, whatever the biology underneath it may be. She protects them. She mourns them when they are killed. She rages at their killer with something that is not performance. Salvatore Moreau carries the infection's failures more visibly. His physical transformation is extreme, his back developing massive tumor-like growth, his skin changing color and texture, gills forming along his neck, his body becoming adapted for aquatic environments in a way that isolates him from ordinary human society entirely. He flooded an entire section of the northern village to create an environment his mutated body could navigate. He lives in a shack built from salvaged materials near the reservoir, spending most of his time submerged. He knows the other lords find him disgusting. He knows Miranda views him as a disappointment. He serves her anyway, with the kind of loyalty that has nowhere else to go. His cognitive capacity was already limited before the Kadu, and the infection's effects on his mind make the gap wider. But he is not stupid in every sense. He understands his situation. He knows exactly what he is. The tragedy of Moreau is not that he lacks self-awareness, but that his self-awareness is entirely accurate. And accuracy in this case is not a comfort. Donna Beneviento is quiet in a way that is more unsettling than any of the physical transformations. Her mutations are invisible unless you breathe the hallucinogenic pollen she can produce, at which point whatever you fear most will become indistinguishable from reality. She communicates through a doll named Angie, who moves and speaks as an extension of Donna's psychology rather than as an independent entity. The doll is a way of interacting with a world that Donna's pre-existing mental health conditions make almost impossible to navigate directly. She had severe social anxiety and what appeared to be elements of psychosis before Miranda's experiment. The Kadu did not heal her. It gave her the ability to make everyone around her as frightened as she always felt. Carl Heisenberg is the only Lord who understands the full scope of what Miranda is doing and resents it without dissembling. His Kadu infection gave him control over electromagnetic fields, the ability to sense and manipulate metal, to levitate through control of his own skeletal structure, to reshape metallic objects through magnetic force alone. He has used this ability to build an army of soldats, cybernetic corpses animated through a combination of mold infection and mechanical components, with the intention of using them against Miranda when the right moment arrives. He is the only Lord who recognizes that Miranda's plan, once it succeeds, leaves the Lords without a purpose. She will not need them after she has what she wants. His factory, the industrial facility he has taken over in the mountains, is where the soldats are assembled and stored. The factory has been running on the surrounding region's stolen machinery and raw materials for years. Heisenberg's redirecting the local mining and metalworking operations toward his own army-building project, while Miranda believes he is simply running his domain as she has directed. He is the most dangerous kind of opponent, someone who is completely aware that he is being used and has been planning his response for years. What she wants is Rose. Miranda receives the intelligence about Rose's existence through the network of contacts that includes the remnants of the connections. They have been monitoring Ethan and Mia as former assets with knowledge that represents an ongoing security concern. When the pregnancy is reported and the genetic analysis of the developing child reveals an entirely fungal cellular structure, the information reaches Miranda within weeks. She understands immediately. A century of experiments, thousands of failed subjects, the Lychans in the ruins outside the village, the hundreds of people whose transformations were too extreme or too unstable to serve her purpose. The four Lords, powerful and extraordinary, but none of them the right kind of host for Eva's archived consciousness. Rose is different from all of them. She is not mold-infected. She is mold-organized. The transfer of Eva's stored neural patterns into Rose's body would not be a matter of introducing foreign tissue into a human host. It would be moving information between compatible systems. The biology is right in a way it has never been right before. The 102 years Miranda has spent searching for this moment collide with the present in a way that feels, to her, like the fulfillment of everything she has endured. She does not think of what she is planning as the destruction of a child. She thinks of it as the restoration of her own. Rose's identity would not be erased. It would simply be replaced by something older and more important. Miranda's grief is real and has been real for a century, and grief on that timescale does not leave any space inside itself for the lives of people who stand between the grieving person and what they have lost. Miranda travels to the Winters house in February 2021. She has been studying Mia's genetic profile through intelligence gathered over years. The shape-shifting that the megamycetes infection granted her allows her to create a flawless imitation of Mia Winters, and she uses it. Chris Redfield's intelligence network has detected irregularities in the household, communication patterns that do not match Mia's established behavioral baseline, behavioral anomalies in a protected person under observation. He does not know about Miranda specifically, but he knows something is wrong, and he makes the decision to act before he fully understands what he is acting against. He raids the house. He shoots who he believes is Mia Winters. Miranda survives because her mold biology can regenerate gunshot wounds. The real Mia is taken into protective custody, alive, because Miranda had replaced her rather than harmed her. Ethan and Rose are extracted by Chris's team. The transport is arranged. Miranda orchestrates the crash. She takes Rose from the wreckage. She divides Rose's body into 4 sections, places each section in a specially designed flask, and distributes the flasks among the 4 Lords for safekeeping. Rose, distributed across 4 physical locations, experiences the megamycetes version of consciousness, present in all 4 places simultaneously, unable to interact with any of them, simply aware and helpless and waiting. The flasks are not simple containers. Miranda designed them to maintain mold tissue in a state of suspended biological activity, alive enough to preserve consciousness, inactive enough to prevent growth or development or any action that might allow Rose to affect her own situation. The megamycete's distributed consciousness mechanism is being used as a prison. The same property that makes the fungal network capable of archiving identity is what keeps Rose fractured and contained. Ethan wakes in the wreckage and follows the only path available to him. He moves through the village, through the castle, through the mansions and reservoirs and factories, recovering each flask in turn. Miranda watches from a distance as he accomplishes exactly what she planned for him to accomplish, eliminating the lords who have outlived their research utility, consolidating the resources she needs for the ceremony. The confrontation is not what Miranda expected. Ethan dies again when she takes his heart. The injury should be final. But the megamycete network, which has been present throughout everything Ethan experienced since 2017, reaches him in the space between death and dispersal. Evelyn's consciousness, a fragment of it still attached to Ethan's mold structure from the original infection at the Baker estate, walks him through the truth of what he is, shows him the guest house, shows him the moment of death in 2017, shows him what the mold did afterward. Ethan absorbs this. He processes it with the same pragmatic focus he has applied to every impossible situation since Louisiana. He makes a choice. It does not matter what he is made of. His daughter is alive. He is going to reach her. He comes back. His body deteriorates as the fungal network loses coherence from the heart wound, his right hand calcifying, tissue stiffening into something that is no longer either human or mold, but a record of what both of those things were. But he has enough time. Miranda performs the ceremony. Rose is reunited. The transfer begins, Eva's consciousness moving from the megamycete's archive toward the vessel Miranda has spent a century preparing. Ethan reaches the site. He disrupts it. Miranda, in her fury, becomes something no longer recognizable as the woman who touched a fungal colony in grief in 1919. Her mold form expressing every century of sorrow and obsession and violence in its final configuration. The thing that confronts Ethan in those last minutes is not Mother Miranda, prophet of the Black God. It is a century of unresolved grief wearing the last shape it has available. He kills her anyway. Chris and the BSAA arrive. The bomb is planted. The megamycete has to be destroyed entirely. Everything it contains, every consciousness it has ever archived, every copied life from every person who died within reach of its underground network over thousands of years, will end in the detonation. Eva will end, along with with every other consciousness the colony preserved. The Library of the Dead, built across thousands of years by an organism that never chose to build it, will close permanently. Ethan makes the choice. He sends Rose and Chris and the aircraft away. He stays. The explosion obliterates the village, the colony, and the last cells of the organism that has been wearing Ethan Winters' shape since 2017. Part 12. What the world became and what Rose carries. The Resident Evil universe, by the time Rose Winters is a teenager, is a world that has been permanently reshaped by the accumulated consequences of decisions made decades before she was born. Umbrella is gone, but its knowledge is not. The T-virus, the G-virus, the Plaga, the C-virus, the mold, the Ouroboros research, all of it has diffused into black markets and government programs and private laboratories in ways that cannot be recalled. The BSAA exists to address the ongoing reality of bioterrorism, but the BSAA has its own institutional drift, its own pressures, its own temptations to use the methods it was created to oppose. Chris Redfield, by the end of Village, has discovered that the BSAA has been deploying bioweapons as soldiers. The organization that exists to prevent what Umbrella built is beginning to become what Umbrella was. The cycle does not end with good intentions. The cycle ends only when the structural pressures that produce these decisions are addressed, and no one in the Resident Evil universe has yet found a way to address the structural pressures. Spencer's eugenics program produced the two people most responsible for the catastrophes of 2006 through 2009. Marcus's viral work produced the T-virus that destroyed Raccoon City. Miranda's grief produced the ideological and methodological template that Spencer transformed into a corporation. Every horror in this franchise's history traces back to a small number of individual decisions made by people who believed their goals justified their methods, and who are often right about the quality of their intellect and profoundly wrong about the wisdom of their purposes. What the series asks, quietly and persistently, across all of its games and all of its decades, is whether the people inside institutions can identify the moment when their institution's logic has turned against the purpose they joined to serve. Whether Chris Redfield can build a better BSAA, or whether the BSAA will build the same story over again with different names. Whether the knowledge accumulated from Umbrella's research can be used without eventually becoming another Umbrella. Whether human organizations, given enough time and enough resources and enough pressure, can maintain the principles they started with. The franchise does not answer this optimistically. The evidence it offers across 30 years of storytelling suggests that institutions reliably drift toward whatever produces the most power and the most resources, and that the individuals inside them who recognize this drift are usually insufficient to reverse it. Leon Kennedy is still fighting. Chris Redfield is still fighting. They have won every engagement they have entered, and the problem persists. Every time a threat is neutralized, a new organization forms in the space that threat occupied. Every time a virus is contained, someone else is developing the next one. Rose's situation at age 16, explored in the Shadows of Rose downloadable content that follows Village by 16 years, is a distillation of every philosophical question the Mold storyline raises. She has abilities that come from what she is biologically. She can interact with the Megamycete's realm, perceive the archived consciousnesses within its network, manipulate mold growths in ways that no one who is simply infected can match. She is more capable than any experimental subject Miranda ever produced, because she is what Miranda was always trying to make and never quite succeeded in creating. She is also a 16-year-old person who wants to be ordinary, who wants the abilities to go away, who understands, because she has grown up knowing what she is, that the capabilities she carries make her a target. She knows that someone will eventually decide that a naturally occurring, mold-based bioweapon with conscious control over her own abilities is too valuable to leave unexamined or unsecured. She has grown up with Chris Redfield in her life, with people who have fought these battles before, and she carries their experience as both protection and warning. She knows how these stories go. In the Megamycete's realm, she encounters her father, not a memory, not a hallucination. The consciousness that was Ethan Winters, preserved in the fragment of the colony that the BSAA recovered before the detonation, aware and present and recognizably her father. The same way Eva survived in the colony's archive for over a century. The same mechanism, the same question that the entire Mold storyline has been asking since Miranda first touched that ancient growth in 1919. If consciousness can be archived perfectly, if identity can be preserved in tissue that was never designed for preservation, if awareness can persist after the body that produced it is gone, then what makes someone real? What makes someone count? Is the Ethan in the archive still Ethan in any meaningful sense? Is the biological difference between mold and flesh actually the most important thing about a person, or is it just the thing we notice first? The mold does not distinguish between a king and a peasant when it archives consciousness. It does not distinguish between a saint and a murderer. It stores everything with equal fidelity because it has no values, no judgment, no sense of what matters and what does not. The Megamycete is not moral. It is simply persistent. And the people whose lives it has preserved, from the anonymous people who died in those mountains before written history began, to the first European nobles whose records show unusual properties, to Eva, to Ethan, all of them are equivalent information in a biological system that was never designed with them in mind. Miranda spent a century making the moral distinction. Eva was more important than everyone else. Ava's consciousness was worth more than the lives of every person in her village, worth more than the thousands of people who became test subjects or Lychans across 100 years of experiments. The certainty of that distinction never wavered in Miranda. Her love for her daughter was genuine, and it was also the most dangerous thing about her. It was the engine that drove everything else. The tragedy of the Resident Evil universe, told across all of its games, is not that evil people do evil things. It is that ordinary people, carrying ordinary human feelings, ordinary grief and ordinary ambition, and ordinary intellectual curiosity can produce effects that no conventional measure of evil would predict. Miranda was not, at her core, a person who wanted to hurt anyone. She wanted her daughter. She made every choice that wanting her daughter required. And the sum of those choices is indistinguishable in its body count and its institutional damage from the choices made by people with no love in them at all. Rose chooses to move forward, to live as herself, in the body she has, with the abilities she cannot remove, and the father she might someday find a way to recover. She carries everything Miranda built toward, everything Evelyn accidentally created, everything Ethan chose to protect. In a biology that is unique in the history of the world, the pattern that created her is still present in every institution that deals with biology. The BSAA, the government programs that succeeded the Connections and Neo Umbrella and the organizations before them. The academic research community where someone is always looking at the mold, at the progenitor strains, at Las Plagas genetics, and seeing something useful rather than something that should be left alone. Someone will eventually decide that Rose Winters represents an opportunity. Whether the people who have survived everything described here, Leon Kennedy still operating, Chris Redfield still building whatever he is building in the aftermath of Village, can identify that pressure before it completes itself into something catastrophic is the question the franchise's ongoing story has not yet answered. What is clear is this: the Resident Evil universe is not a story about monsters. The monsters are illustrations. They are what happens when the machinery runs without anyone willing to stop it, when ambition becomes ideology and grief becomes methodology and institutional power concentrates without any counterweight. Every creature that has ever lurched through a corridor in this franchise is the product of a specific human decision made by someone who convinced themselves their intentions were good enough. Spencer wanted to save humanity from itself by remaking it in his image. Marcus wanted recognition for his work. Miranda wanted her daughter. The Connections wanted revenue. None of them thought they were the villains. Every step along the path from the progenitor garden in West Africa to the burning village in Eastern Europe made sense to the person who took it. That is the horror that does not require a dark room or a flickering light to feel. The horror that persists at normal brightness, in ordinary institutions, in the comfortable distance between what we say we are doing and what we are actually doing. Somewhere in the rubble of Raccoon City, the memory of a city lives in the people who escaped it, in Leon's determination, in Claire's care for the people she protects, in Sherry's unusual blood that carries the ghost of what her father did to himself in a dying moment on a laboratory floor. Somewhere in the archives of whatever government entity collected what it could from Wesker's estate and his research files, the echoes of his project continue to influence development that he will never direct. And somewhere in whatever fragment of the Megamycete network the BSAA was able to recover after the explosion in the village, a father waits in the dark, aware, present, patient in the way that only something existing outside ordinary time can be patient, waiting for his daughter. The village has burned. The Megamycete is destroyed. Rose is alive. And the world that produced all of it is still out there, still running on the same mechanisms, still full of people with knowledge and resources and ambitions that outrun their wisdom. The story is not finished. It never quite finishes. It just goes quiet for a while. There is something worth sitting with in that quietness. The Resident Evil universe spans more than a century of human time, from the moment Miranda first encountered the Megamycete in those mountain caves in 1919, to Rose Winters standing in a field 16 years after the village burned, surrounded by agents who do not fully understand what she is. A century during which 2 world wars reshaped political geography, during which the Cold War created the intelligence architectures that organizations like Umbrella would exploit, during which pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries grew into some of the most powerful institutional forces in human history. The lore did not exist in isolation from that context. It was embedded in it. Spencer understood that the post-war period, with its funding structures and its ideological anxieties and its governments hungry for deterrence, was the exact environment in which an organization like Umbrella could flourish. He read the landscape correctly. He built his cathedral to eugenics inside the architecture of ordinary corporate life, and it worked for decades before it collapsed. What survives an empire, even an unofficial one, built in laboratories rather than parliaments? The answer the franchise keeps returning to is the people it changed. Not always the survivors, sometimes the damage. Sherry Birkin carries her father's G-virus legacy inside her immune system, an involuntary inheritance from a man who loved her enough to try to save her, even while he was losing what made him a person. Leon Kennedy carries the memory of a city he walked into as a rookie on his first day and walked out of as something else entirely. Someone who understands that the institutions meant to protect people are not automatically the same thing as the forces that actually protect people. Claire carries something similar but warmer, a refusal to let the scale of the catastrophe make individual lives feel small or expendable. Chris carries the weight of having been right about things no one believed until it was too late, and the complicated grief of having fought so long that fighting has become the closest thing to a resting state he knows. Ada Wong carries her own version of all of this, though she would not describe it in these terms. She has operated at the intersection of intelligence, corporate espionage, and bioweapons politics for so long that the line between her actual values and her professional performance has become genuinely difficult to locate, for others and perhaps for herself. But the fact that Leon is still alive owes something to her choices across multiple operations, and that is a form of clarity even when nothing else is. These people are not extraordinary because they survived extraordinary events. They are extraordinary because of the particular texture of their survival, the way they chose to carry forward what the catastrophes left them with. The franchise, at its best, is interested in that texture, in the specific shape of what a person becomes after they have walked through the kind of darkness these games document. And in the quiet, if you listen, you can hear the mycelia growing slowly through the dark earth, through the old stone, through the places where no light has ever reached, continuing the long work of remembering everything that has ever lived and died within reach of its patient, endless threads. If this has helped you drift off tonight, or if you have followed the whole journey and are now sitting with the weight of a universe this dense and this carefully constructed, I want you to know that this channel exists because of you. Every comment, every like, every subscription is what keeps nights like this one coming. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next one. And if there is a corner of any game's lore you want to fall asleep to next time, leave it in the comments below. I read every single one. Sleep well. The night is quiet. The village has burned, and we are safe.